The great hall of the Cathari Empire was carved from dark crystal, polished so perfectly that every pillar shimmered like frozen lightning. Hundreds of alien nobles stood in silence beneath its high ceilings, their eyes glowing faintly in the dim blue light. The banners of the royal line hung unmoving, even though the air itself felt tense. No one dared breathe too loudly. No one dared shift their weight. The entire hall felt like it was holding its breath for one single reason. The queen was angry. Queen Serakra of the Kethari stood at the far end of the hall, tall and imposing, her scales catching the light like sharp glass. Her crown of woven metal hovered slightly above her head, floating on a gentle field of energy. Normally, her presence brought respect and confidence, but today something was wrong, something serious. And everyone knew anger from her was rare, dangerously rare. Her voice trembled as she shouted through the wide hall, echoing off the crystal walls with force that made several guards flinch. "Who touched my armor?" Silence crushed the room again. Not a single noble dared answer. Warriors 10 feet tall stared at the floor. Advisors kept their wings tucked tightly against their bodies. Even the smallest servants flattened themselves against the walls, terrified. The queen's armor was sacred. It was not only a symbol of her throne, but a living relic of her lineage. It held the encoded memories of her ancestors and the recorded history of her family's victories. Touching it without permission was seen as an insult so great that past offenders had lost positions, titles, even entire clans. The armor was protected, guarded, and sealed at all times. Only the queen herself was allowed to handle it. But last night, during the final inspection before the treaty ceremony, her attendants discovered something shocking. The armor's inner layer had been disturbed. Someone had removed the protective seal and handled the internal plates. It was impossible, yet it had happened. Her voice, sharp as a blade, cut through the tension again. "I ask once more," she said, slower this time, the tremble still present, as if her fury was fighting against a deeper fear. "Who touched my armor?" Still no answer. The nobles looked at one another but refused to speak. They all knew the consequences. No one wanted to admit even being close to her armory. Even the highest generals avoided that place without official reason. A faint crackle of energy hummed around the queen, the telltale sign that her patience was ending. Her personal guards took one slow step forward, forming a threatening semicircle in front of her. Their armor flashed with warning signals. Someone would pay. Someone had to answer. But everyone in the hall stood frozen. Everyone except one. At the far back, almost hidden behind a large pillar, stood a single human, Elias Ward. He wore simple gray maintenance clothing with a small badge showing he worked in the palace's lower engineering sections. Compared to the towering Kethari nobles, Elias looked impossibly small. His shoulders reached barely halfway up their chests. His skin lacked the glowing patterns the aliens had. He looked soft, fragile, almost breakable. Most of the Empire did not understand why humans were hired at all. They were slow by Cathari standards, had no scales, no wings, no natural energy shields. Humans were not warriors. They were not diplomats. They were mostly used for small repairs, delicate adjustments, or things that required patience, but not strength. Elias had been sweeping dust out of a vent behind the pillar when the queen made her demand. He had hoped to stay unnoticed. He had hoped the meeting would end quickly. He had hoped no one would expect anything from him. But each time the queen repeated the question, guilt crawled deeper up his throat, because he knew the answer. He had touched her armor. He had done it with good reason. But still, he had done it. His heart thudded in his chest, but he straightened his shoulders. He knew remaining silent would only make things worse. So when the queen asked the question for the third time, and the hall once again drowned in fearful silence, Elias stepped forward. His voice was small but steady. "I did," The words echoed much louder than he expected. Every alien head snapped toward the sound. Dozens of eyes glowed with surprise, disbelief, and some with outrage. A human? A human had touched the Queen's armor? A ripple of whispers rushed through the hall, rising like a wave. Several nobles hissed in shock. Others stepped back as if the confession itself was contagious. The Queen turned her head slowly, her pupils narrowing. "Who spoke?" she demanded. Elias stepped fully out from behind the pillar, his hands raised slightly to show he meant no harm. He repeated, louder this time, "I touched your armor." The hall fell unnaturally silent, as if sound itself refused to exist. For a moment, even the Queen seemed frozen. Her expression shifted, not just anger but confusion, disbelief, something deeper. She stared at him as if trying to understand how such a small being could dare speak so plainly in front of her throne. Her guards reacted first. 3 of them moved, towering over Elias, energy shields flickering to life, each one large enough to crush him with a single strike if ordered. Elias swallowed, but he didn't look away. He spoke clearly. "I didn't touch it to insult you. I touched it because it was in danger." The Queen raised a hand, stopping her guards immediately. They froze mid-step, her eyes locked onto Elias, sharp and unblinking. "In danger?" she repeated quietly. Elias nodded. "Yes, Your Majesty." The nobles murmured again, angry or confused. A human daring to explain himself? It sounded ridiculous to them. The Queen silenced the entire hall with a single flick of her claw. "Approach!" Elias hesitated only a second before walking forward. Every step felt heavier than the last. Every alien in the hall watched him. Some looked ready to see him executed. Others simply looked curious. Humans were strange to them, unpredictable, different in ways they still didn't fully understand. When Elias reached the center of the hall, he stopped at the distance allowed for commoners, but the Queen tilted her head. Closer. He walked until he stood at the base of the crystal steps that led to her throne. She was towering above him, her shadow falling like a cloak over his entire body. She studied him with unsettling intensity. "Explain," she said. Elias took a slow breath. "I was assigned to clean and check the air recycler vents near the Royal Armory yesterday. When I passed the entrance, I noticed something strange on the floor. A faint shimmer like dust floating upward instead of falling down, which is not normal." The Queen and several generals exchanged glances. Elias continued. "I followed the shimmer and found tiny creatures, microscopic energy parasites, clinging to the base of your armor stand." A shocked sound moved through the hall. Even the Queen stiffened. "These parasites feed on stored energy," Elias said. "If left alone, they would have eaten through the armor's inner plates by this morning. Your protective systems would have failed and you could have been harmed during the treaty ceremony." The Queen's eyes widened just slightly. Elias reached into his pocket and carefully pulled out a small sealed tube. Inside, faint sparks of light moved like drifting dust. "I collected a sample," he said, "and I removed the ones clinging to your armor. I touched only what I needed to clean." For a long moment, no one said anything. The Queen stared at the tube. Her trembling voice from earlier suddenly made sense. She hadn't been angry because of the insult. She had been afraid the armor that protected her lineage had been damaged. Slowly, she stepped down from her throne, her movements quiet but filled with authority. Her guards tensed but did not stop her. When she reached Elias, she stood almost chest to head taller than him. Her silver-scaled hand extended toward the tube. He handed it to her without shaking. She studied the parasite inside, her jaw tightening. "How did you see this?" she asked softly. "My best warriors and advisors have inspected the armory every cycle. None reported anything unusual." Elias shrugged lightly. Humans notice small things. We're used to looking for problems before they become bigger. It's how we survive. A few nobles scoffed quietly, but the queen silenced them with a single glance. She returned her gaze to Elias. You saved my armor. I tried, he said. I didn't mean any disrespect. The queen slowly exhaled. The trembling that filled her voice earlier now faded, replaced by a calmer, controlled tone. Guards, she said. Elias braced himself, but the queen did not order his punishment. Instead, she said, Bring this human to the royal armory. I want him to show me every detail of what he saw. No one touches the armor until he explains everything. A wave of absolute shock spread through the hall. A human giving instructions in the queen's armory? Elias felt the weight of every stare, but he kept his expression steady. The queen looked down at him one last time. When I asked who touched my armor, she said quietly, I did not expect anyone to answer. And yet you did. There was something almost like respect in her voice. Come, she said. From this moment, you will speak directly to me about this threat. Elias nodded slowly. Yes, Your Majesty. And as the guards escorted him toward the inner palace, the entire hall remained frozen, trying to understand how a simple human had just shaken the core of the Cathari court with nothing more than honesty and courage. Elias walked through the inner corridors of the palace with 2 royal guards on either side of him. Their footsteps echoed loudly in the quiet hallway, each step sounding heavier than it needed to be. The guards were enormous compared to him, their bodies covered in shimmering armor that pulsed with faint blue energy. Elias felt like a small dot walking between 2 tall walls. Even then, he kept his eyes forward and his breathing steady. He had been in the palace before, but never this deep into its heart. The inner corridors were meant only for high-ranking officials, personal staff, or those trusted by the queen herself. Elias knew he was none of these things. He was just a maintenance worker who cleaned vents and fixed small machines. And yet, somehow, he was now being escorted by royal guards toward the queen's armory as if he was important. The queen walked ahead of the group, her movements silent and filled with authority. Her scales reflected the soft hallway lights like smooth metal. Elias noticed she walked slightly slower than she normally would, as if giving him time to follow comfortably. It surprised him, but he said nothing. Everything about this moment felt surreal. When they reached the entrance to the royal armory, the guards positioned themselves beside the massive doors carved with ancient symbols. The doors slowly opened with a deep humming sound, revealing a room filled with glowing displays, weapon stands, and several layers of security barriers. The queen glanced back at Elias. Enter, she said softly. He stepped in. It was the first time he had seen the royal armory this close. Every weapon inside was centuries old, a part of the rich history of the Cathari. The room felt alive with energy, as though the weapons recognized the presence of their queen. At the center stood the armor, tall, elegant, silver with intricate blue patterns that pulsed rhythmically like a heartbeat. Elias remembered touching it the day before. He had been nervous even then, but something about the small parasites had caught his eye. He could not have just walked away. The queen moved beside him, her eyes on the armor. Show me, she said. Where did you find the parasites? Elias approached the armor carefully. He pointed to the lower inner plates near the energy core. They were here, he explained, hiding in the grooves. It was almost invisible, but I noticed a faint shimmer. That's when I realized something was wrong. The queen examined the area closely. She had looked at her armor hundreds of times, but she had not seen what Elias had. Strange, she murmured. They disguised themselves perfectly. Elias nodded. Yes, They attach themselves to energy. Your armor has a strong energy flow, so it attracts them. A group of royal scientists entered the room, clearly summoned by the Queen. They carried scanning devices and tools, their eyes filled with curiosity and tension. One of them, an elder with deep blue scales, stepped forward. "Your Majesty," he said respectfully, "is this the human who handled the armor?" "Yes," the Queen replied. The scientist looked Elias up and down, as though trying to understand how someone so small could have seen something the entire team had missed. Elias ignored the staring and focused on the armor. He spoke again, his voice steady. "The parasites weren't here long. If they had stayed for another day, they would have damaged the inner shell." One of the scientists raised a scanner and studied the space Elias pointed to. His eyes widened. "He is correct," the scientist said. "Energy residue matches a parasite pattern. If not removed, the armor's core could have destabilized." The Queen's expression hardened. Her fear turned into something sharper. Anger, but not at Elias. At whoever caused this. She turned to the scientists. "Find their origin," she ordered. "Trace them. I want to know how they entered my palace." The scientists bowed and immediately began scanning the area. The Queen then faced Elias again. "You saw what my finest warriors and advisors could not," she said. Elias shrugged lightly. "Humans are good at noticing small problems. We don't have strength like your people, so we use our eyes more." The Queen studied him quietly. Her gaze softened slightly. "Your honesty helped save my lineage?" Elias felt his ears warm. He wasn't used to being praised, especially not by someone so powerful. "I just did my job, Your Majesty." "Your job," she said, "does not include saving my life. Yet you did." Before he could respond, one of the scientists called out urgently, "Your Majesty, we found traces leading outside the armory." The Queen turned sharply. "Where?" The scientist pointed to the floor near the entrance. A faint trail of energy residue glowed under the scanner's light, leading toward the hallways. Elias frowned. "That doesn't make sense. These parasites don't move on their own. Something carried them here." The Queen looked at him curiously. "You believe they were planted?" Elias nodded. "Yes, they were placed carefully near the energy core. That's not natural." The room grew heavier with tension. A deliberate attack inside the palace was no small matter. The Queen said, "We will follow the trail." The group moved quickly, scanning each step. The glowing residue led them through 2 corridors, then down a narrow maintenance passage. Elias recognized the route. It led toward the lower levels where small repair crews worked. The guards tensed as they approached the area. Several servants stepped aside, bowing quickly as the Queen passed. The trail ended at a vent panel. Elias kneeled, examining it closely. "This panel was opened recently," he said. "Someone without official access came through here." One of the guards asked, "Could it have been one of your crew?" Elias shook his head. "No. Humans always file reports before opening anything near the royal wing. It wasn't one of us." The Queen crouched beside him, her eyes narrowing. "Then who?" Elias pressed a few hidden buttons, and the vent slid open. Inside, they found a faint scorch mark, blackened metal that looked like something had burned through quickly. Elias touched it gently. It was cold now, but not old. "A scanning drone," he said. "Someone used a cloaked drone to drop the parasites into the armory." The Queen stood tall, her expression turning cold with determination. "An assassination attempt." The scientists and guards exchanged worried looks. Elias said quietly, "If the parasites had reached the core, they could have overloaded your armor. During the treaty ceremony, the explosion would have looked like an accident." The Queen did not speak for a moment. She understood the implications. A failed ceremony, a dead queen, an empire thrown into chaos. She looked at Elias. "You prevented a disaster that could have destroyed the stability of my reign." Elias rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. "I just followed the signs." "For that," she said, "you will help us find who sent the drone." Elias blinked. "Me?" The queen nodded. "Your instincts uncovered the threat. I want those instincts guiding this investigation." Elias felt a mixture of surprise and responsibility. He had never been placed in a position like this, but he could not refuse the queen. "I'll do what I can," he said. The queen gave a single nod. "Good. You will work beside my generals and advisors until we find the enemy." It was an unbelievable command. The guards looked stunned. The scientists stared at Elias as if seeing him for the first time. The queen began walking back toward the armory. Elias walked beside her, though he stayed a respectful step behind. She spoke without looking at him. "Many nobles will object to a human taking part in this investigation." Elias gave a small smile. "I figured." The queen continued. "But it does not matter. You saw what others could not, and I trust those who see clearly." He glanced up at her. "Thank you, Your Majesty." She did not respond, but he noticed her jaw relax slightly. They reached the armory again. The scientists were still scanning the area. Several generals had arrived too, their armor gleaming sharply. One general bowed to the queen. "Majesty, we heard there was an intruder." "There was," she said, "and we have already begun tracking them." The general nodded, but his eyes drifted to Elias. He frowned. "Why is a human here?" The queen answered firmly. "Because he discovered the threat before any of you." The general stiffened in embarrassment, but did not argue. Elias kept his expression neutral. He did not want to offend anyone, especially not a general. The queen addressed the entire room. "From this moment forward, Elias Ward will assist in protecting the royal armor and uncovering the source of this attack. His observations saved us once. They may save us again." There were whispers, some shocked, some offended. A few nobles in the back did not bother to hide their displeasure, but no one dared question the queen. Elias felt their eyes on him, heavy, judging, doubtful. But he stood straight. He knew he didn't have strength or power like the Cathari. What he had were his eyes, his instincts, and his willingness to step forward when everyone else stayed silent. The queen turned to him. "Prepare yourself, Elias. This threat may be larger than you think." He nodded slowly. "I understand." He did understand, at least partly. But as he watched the scientists investigate the armor and the guards secure the room, he sensed something deeper, something dangerous. The parasites were not random. The drone was not random. Someone inside or close to the palace had planned this, someone bold enough to attack the queen herself. Elias realized the truth quietly. This was no small incident. This was the beginning of something much bigger, and he was standing right in the center of it. The morning cycle began with the palace still wrapped in quiet tension. The usual rhythm of servants working, guards training, and officials moving through wide corridors felt different now. Everyone spoke in softer voices. Everyone walked a little quicker. News of the attempted attack on the Queen's armor had spread, even though no one spoke about it directly. Rumors moved like silent waves through the palace, each one heavier than the last. Elias walked behind a group of royal guards toward the strategic chamber. He had barely slept. His mind kept replaying the events from the day before. The parasites, the drone, the Queen's command that he helped find the attacker. Everything still felt unreal. He was just a human maintenance worker. Yet now he was being escorted to a room where generals and advisors planned the Empire's defenses. He wasn't sure if he belonged there, but he knew he had to try. When the guards opened the door, Elias stepped into a large circular room filled with holographic displays. Maps of nearby star systems floated in mid-air. Energy grids blinked with shifting colors. Several alien commanders stood around the center table, their postures rigid with tension. The Queen stood among them, her presence dominating the room without effort. She turned when Elias entered. "Good," she said. "You're here." Elias gave a small bow. "Yes, Your Majesty." One of the generals, a tall alien with deep red scales, frowned as Elias approached. "I still do not understand why a human is participating in a security briefing meant for our highest ranks." The Queen's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Because he has seen what you have not." The general lowered his head in silence. Another hologram flickered to life above the table, showing a small black drone with sharp folding wings. The scientist who scanned the vent earlier spoke while adjusting the display. "This is the cloaked drone that carried the parasites. We reconstructed its shape from the scorch patterns." Elias stepped closer. The drone looked familiar, not in a personal way, but in a mechanical one. Humans didn't make drones like this, but he recognized the structure. It reminded him of something used by a different alien species. He studied the model carefully. The Queen noticed his focus. "What do you see?" Elias pointed at the thin edges of the wings. "This design, it's Vorn technology." Immediately the room erupted with whispers. The generals exchanged alarmed glances. One of them said sharply, "The Vorn hive is extinct. They were wiped out decades ago." Elias shook his head. "Maybe you thought that, but humans have seen their technology in outer ruins and abandoned ships. Their designs are different from everyone else's. They hide their energy signatures, they use triangular wing structures, and they always leave burn marks like the one we found." The scientists scanned the hologram again. "He is correct," one said. "The structure matches Vorn origin." The Queen narrowed her eyes. "Then they are not extinct." The weight of her words made the air feel heavier. Elias leaned over the table. "If the Vorn are back, this wasn't just a random attack. They targeted you on purpose." A general asked, "But why now?" Elias replied slowly, "Because you are about to attend the treaty ceremony with the outer colonies. A perfect moment to destabilize the Empire." Another general slammed his fist on the table. "If the Vorn have returned, we must prepare the entire fleet." But the Queen raised a hand. "No, not yet. First, we must know the full extent of the threat." A new hologram appeared, showing the palace layout. A red line traced the drone's path from the vent to the armory. Elias studied it. Something was wrong. The drone could not have flown through the tight passage alone. The vents were too narrow, too complex. He pointed at the map. The drone needed help. It couldn't navigate this without someone guiding it from inside. The generals stopped speaking. The Queen's expression hardened. "You are saying that someone in this palace helped the Vorn?" Elias nodded. "Yes, someone who knows the palace layout. Someone who could bypass the turret systems, timing, and security rotations." Silence filled the room. None of the Cathari looked at each other. They all knew what this meant. A traitor. The Queen spoke with calm, icy focus. "Find them." She turned to Elias. "You will lead the analysis team." Elias blinked. "Me?" The Queen nodded. "Your instincts saw this from the start. You follow patterns others ignore. I trust your judgment." He swallowed, unsure but determined. "I'll do my best." Hours passed as Elias worked with the scientists and a few selected guards. They scanned hallways, vents, and passage systems, tracking the drone's trail. Elias studied every piece of data, every glowing map and record. His brain felt hot from concentration, but he kept pushing. Then he noticed something odd. A narrow pathway on the map had been bypassed by the drone. Instead of traveling through a standard maintenance route, it took a longer, more unusual path, one that only palace staff with special clearance used. He leaned closer. Why would the drone take the long route? It makes no sense. One guard answered, that section is cleaner. Less dust. Fewer obstacles. Elias shook his head. That's the problem. Parasites thrive better in dusty environments. Whoever guided the drone chose the cleaner route to avoid leaving a trail. The Queen stepped beside him. So they knew about the parasites. Exactly, Elias said. They didn't want to risk the parasites attaching to random places. They wanted them only on your armor. The Queen grew silent. A new hologram appeared showing the palace staff roster. Thousands of names. Elias scanned the list, but something felt off. There were too many people to filter. He needed another angle. What about the security logs? Elias asked. A scientist replied, all doors in that hallway require access stamps. Show me the stamps from last night. A large display flickered on. Most stamps belonged to guards doing their normal rounds. But one caught Elias's eye, a single access stamp that appeared only once. Only one time at the same moment the drone entered the vent system. Who is that? Elias asked. The room grew tense. The Queen walked closer and read the name aloud. Marotech. A general hissed under his breath. A royal noble. Elias frowned. Is he trustworthy? The general clenched his jaw. He is ambitious. Too ambitious. The Queen's eyes narrowed. I stripped him of rank years ago for disobedience. He blames me for his downfall. Elias pieced it together slowly. Then he has motive and access. The Queen's voice became sharp. Guards, bring Marotech, now! 2 guards ran out immediately. Elias continued studying the map. Something else bothered him. The drone didn't just target the armor, it positioned itself perfectly for maximum damage. The timing matched the upcoming ceremony. Everything was too precise. He turned to the Queen. This wasn't just one noble acting alone. Someone is guiding him. And that someone might not be from this palace. The Queen listened carefully. Explain, she said. Elias pointed at the hologram. A normal trader wouldn't know how to plant Vorn parasites. They wouldn't know which part of your armor was most vulnerable. They wouldn't know the energy patterns. A scientist added, only Vorn tacticians knew such details. The Queen stood very still. Elias realized the truth before anyone said it. This isn't a simple betrayal, he said quietly. The Vorn are using someone in your palace to test your defenses. This attack was just the first step. The Queen spoke with grim certainty. They are preparing for something larger. Before anyone could respond, the chamber doors burst open. The guards who went to find Marotech returned, but only one was standing. The second guard was being carried, unconscious. The standing guard bowed quickly. Majesty, Marotech escaped. The Queen's eyes flashed with shock and anger. Escaped? How? We reached his quarters too late. He had already fled through the outer passageways. And he injured one of us. Elias felt the weight of the moment. They were too late. The traitor was already moving, possibly ready to strike again. The Queen's voice was calm, but the room felt colder when she spoke. Seal every exit. Lock down the palace. No one gets in or out. The guards bowed and immediately activated the lockdown protocols. A deep vibration spread through the floor as massive shields sealed the outer walls. Elias stepped forward. He's running because he knows we found out. He'll try to hide evidence, maybe destroy something important. A general asked, where will he go? He can't pass the shield. Elias looked at the map again. Then he understood. He won't run outward, Elias said. He'll run inward. The Queen turned sharply. To where? The armory, Elias said. He knows you're focusing on the drone. He might try to damage the armor again, or hide proof of Vorn involvement. The queen did not hesitate. To the armory. Now. The guards moved instantly. The queen strode forward, her energy radiating stronger with each step. Elias followed, his pulse quickening. When they reached the armory, the doors were slightly open. The guards rushed in. The queen stepped inside. Elias followed and froze. Marotech was there. The traitorous noble stood near the armor, breathing heavily, holding a strange device in his hand. His eyes were filled with fury and desperation. The queen's voice echoed through the room. "Step away from my armor." Marotech snarled. "You took my honor, my rank, my future. I will take everything from you." Elias noticed the device in Marotech's hand. It hummed with unstable energy. It wasn't meant as a weapon. It was a detonator. Before anyone could move, the device beeped louder. Elias shouted, "Get back!" But Marotech pressed the trigger. The room flashed with blinding white light, and everything exploded into chaos. The hall of the Zirath Citadel was silent as Terran stood at the center, waiting for the final decision. The great banners of the royal house hung from the ceiling, each one marked with the ancient sigils of battles fought over thousands of years. The alien queen, Saraka, sat on her throne made of dark crystal, her posture calm but her eyes locked onto him with focus so sharp it felt like a blade. Everyone in the chamber remembered the moment she had asked who touched her armor. They remembered how her voice had trembled through every wall, how every warrior had stepped back in fear, and how only a human, only Terran had stepped forward. That single moment had changed everything. It had exposed the traitor. It had saved her life, and it had shown the Empire something it had not seen in centuries, a human who acted without fear. But now everything had shifted again. The enemy fleet moved closer every hour. The traitor, Vornak, had joined them. The council was divided, and the queen had made a decision that shocked every Zirathi elder. She wanted Terran at her side for the final stand. Terran stood tall even though his heart was heavy. He did not know what she would say next. And he knew the entire court watched him like a strange creature brought in from another world. But he held himself steady. The queen finally rose from her throne. The sound of her armor, now fully repaired after the sabotage, echoed across the hall. Her voice was calm, but beneath the calm was strength born from centuries of ruling. "Terran of Earth," she said, "the Empire owes you more than gratitude. Without you, the traitor would still hide among us. Without you, we would walk into a trap. And without you, my armor, my life, would have been taken from me." Terran bowed his head slightly. "I only did what was right." Her eyes softened just a little. "You did more than that. You acted when thousands stayed silent." The court shifted uncomfortably. Some of the elders bowed their heads, ashamed. Others looked annoyed that a human had earned the queen's praise. But she continued. "The enemy fleet approaches with enough firepower to shatter our outer colonies. They follow Vornak, who knows our weaknesses. We must face him, and we must win. For that, I need someone who sees what others miss. Someone who does not think like us. Someone who has already proved he can stand against fear." She paused, letting her words fill every corner of the hall. "I choose you." Gasps rippled through the audience. Terran felt his chest tighten. He was not Zirathi. He was not a soldier trained for interstellar war. He had only been a mechanic on a human freighter before fate threw him into this world of warriors and empires. But he also knew he could not step back now. Too much waited on this moment. "What do you need me to do?" he asked. The queen stepped down from the throne. The guards moved aside quickly as she approached him, the long blade on her hip glowing faintly in the blue light. "You will stand beside me on the command deck. You will help us predict the traitor's strategy, and you will show the Empire why humans are not to be underestimated." Terran took a slow breath. "I'll do my best, Your Majesty." She nodded once. "I ask for nothing more." The council tried to protest, but her glare silenced them. When the queen turned back to Taryn, her tone softened again. "Prepare yourself. We leave within the hour. The battle begins tonight." Taryn followed the queen out of the great hall, escorted by guards who looked at him with a mix of suspicion and respect. As they walked through the long halls, Taryn felt the weight of what lay ahead. But he also felt something else, something strange but real. He felt he belonged there, not because of rank, not because of blood, but because he had earned their trust in the moment it mattered most. On the flagship, the command deck buzzed with activity. Screens lit up the room with red and blue displays of incoming enemy formations. The fleet was massive, much larger than the Xerath forces. It was clear Vornak expected an easy victory. The queen stood in the center, calm as always. Taryn stood beside her, scanning the information with eyes trained by years of repairing complex human systems. Something felt off. The enemy formation looked too simple, too direct. It reminded him of a maneuver he once saw human smugglers use, a fake attack to distract from a hidden one. He stepped closer to the queen. "Your Majesty." "Something's wrong." She turned. "Explain." "This front line, they're too slow, too spread out. They're meant to look strong, but they're stalling. They're waiting for something to hit us from another angle." The queen's eyes narrowed, and she ordered the sensors to widen their scan. A moment later, the screen revealed a hidden cluster of ships behind a moon fragment, positioned perfectly to strike the queen's flagship from behind. The officers gasped. The queen looked at Taryn with pride. "You saw this before our systems did." He nodded. "Humans have to think around corners sometimes." She gave the order to reposition the fleet, turning their formation before the hidden group could strike. When the enemy ships realized they had been discovered, they fired early, but their attack missed the flagship entirely. Taryn's insight had saved thousands of lives. The battle began. The sound of cannons and energy beams shook the ship. Explosions flashed across the darkness. The queen commanded with precision, her voice steady even as the enemy closed in. Taryn worked beside her, predicting Vornak's moves, explaining patterns in the enemy's attacks, helping the Xerathi adapt faster than the traitor expected. But Vornak was not done. Suddenly, a message flashed on the screen, an incoming transmission. The queen allowed it, and Vornak's face appeared. His eyes burned with anger when he saw Taryn standing beside her. "So the human still lives," Vornak growled. "And you trust him more than your own people?" "I trust actions, not claims," the queen replied coldly. "And his actions have protected the Empire more than your lies ever did." Vornak laughed bitterly. "Then watch as the Empire you protect burns." The transmission cut. Moments later, the enemy fleet shifted into a strange pattern, one that Taryn recognized instantly. It was a collapse maneuver designed to crush the center of the Xerathi formation. Taryn grabbed the edge of the table. "They're going to close around us. If we stay in formation, we'll be trapped." The queen looked at him. "Then we break out." She ordered the ships to scatter and regroup on the far side of the battlefield. It was risky, but it prevented the trap from closing. The enemy fleet stumbled for a moment, their timing thrown off. That small delay changed everything. The Xerathi ships counterattacked, slicing through the enemy lines. Taryn watched as the tide shifted. What once seemed hopeless now looked possible. Finally, the queen turned to her weapons director. "Target Vornak's flagship." A beam of energy shot from the Xerath flagship. It tore through the traitor's ship with precision. The hull cracked, flames erupted, and the ship exploded into a cloud of shattered metal. Silence fell on the command deck as the enemy fleet broke formation and scattered. The battle was over. The Queen slowly turned to Taran. "Today, you saved the Empire." Taran shook his head. "We saved it together." The Queen stepped closer, her voice warm. "The hall where I once questioned who touched my armor. Today it will remember a different moment, the moment a human stood with me and protected an entire world." Taran smiled, a tired but proud smile. For the first time since he arrived in the Zeroth Empire, he felt not like an outsider, but like someone who had carved his place through courage, loyalty, and heart. The Queen faced her officers. "Let it be known across the Empire. Taran of Earth is an honored guardian of the throne." And as the stars glowed outside the large window, he realized something. This was not the end of his journey. It was only the beginning.